The galaxy had forgotten Earth. For most alien civilizations, humanity was nothing more than an old story. A tale spoken in quiet halls, a name mentioned in faded records, a whisper in the long corridors of history. Many believed humans had burned themselves out in ancient wars, or vanished into some dark corner of space. To most, they were echoes, faint and hollow, with no weight left in the present. But deep in a lonely sector of the Orion Arm, humans still lived. On the colony world of Aurelia Prime, life was not easy. The skies were gray from endless storms, the soil thin and stubborn, and the oceans restless. Yet for centuries, people had survived here, building cities beneath protective domes, digging farms out of the barren rock, and raising children who were told only fragments of Earth's past. They called themselves simply the Descendants. To them, Earth was a legend, a birthplace hidden behind time's curtain. Few records remained. Few dared to believe the stories of a blue planet with vast forests, mountains, and seas. But though memories faded, one truth endured. Humans never gave up. Captain Arik Vey stood at the observation deck of the Aurelia Defense Command Station. The station orbited high above the world, its metal frame worn and scarred from years of storms and micrometeor strikes. Through the wide viewport, he watched the colony below, the domed cities glowing faintly against the dark surface. Behind him, the steady hum of the station filled the air. Screens flickered, showing orbital paths, cargo shipments, and the movements of the small defense fleet. Arik was not young, but not old either. His face carried the lines of long service. His eyes steady, calm, but touched with a weight that never seemed to fade. He wore a dark uniform patched in several places, its fabric older than some of the recruits under his command. Humanity had little, but what they had, they kept alive. "Captain," said a voice. Arik turned. Lieutenant Mira Solon entered the deck, carrying a datapad. She was younger, her hair tied back in a neat braid, her expression sharp with focus. She saluted briefly. "Report," Arik said. Mira glanced at her pad. "Routine cargo scans complete. Outer patrols returning, but..." She hesitated. Arik raised an eyebrow. "But?" "There was a signal," she said. "Faint but unusual, not local traffic. It came from beyond the sector." Arik studied her carefully. "Alien?" Mira nodded slowly. "Most likely. The frequency pattern matches known extragalactic communication." For a long moment, Arik said nothing. Humans had not heard from outsiders in centuries. They lived quietly, isolated, tucked away in forgotten space. The galaxy had moved on without them. That was how most preferred it. Yet here, now, came a whisper from beyond. "Bring it to the command chamber," Arik said at last. His voice was calm, but his mind was already racing. The command chamber was a circular room lined with consoles and screens. Officers filled the stations, their hands moving quickly over controls as streams of data flickered. The signal Mira had discovered now played across the main display. It was not in human language. It was sharp, heavy, filled with clicks and growls, a sound not meant for human ears. But the station's translators slowly worked, turning fragments of the alien speech into rough meaning. The words made the room fall silent. "The Dominion moves to claim Frontier World. Resistance will be crushed." Mira's voice was steady as she read the translation aloud, but her eyes betrayed unease. "It's a military broadcast. They're declaring control of this region. Whoever they are, and they're not asking. They're warning." Arik's jaw tightened. The Dominion. He had heard of them, though only in half-forgotten reports passed down over generations. A vast empire, ruthless, expanding. They were said to enslave or erase those who resisted. And now, they were coming here. The officers around the room shifted uneasily. Some whispered. Some looked down, refusing to meet Arik's gaze. Finally, one spoke. "Commander," Rael Juno, older than Arik, his hair silver, his voice heavy. "We cannot face them. Our fleet is too small. Our weapons too old. If this Dominion decides to move against us, Aurelia will fall in days. The chamber grew even quieter. The truth of Rael's words weighed on every heart. But Arik did not bow to silence. His voice cut through the room. Perhaps, but we are human. Dozens of eyes turned toward him. He stood tall, his gaze firm, his tone steady. The galaxy has forgotten us. They call us echoes, shadows, myths. But we are not gone. We endured storms, hunger, and loss. We built lives from nothing. And if this Dominion believes we will simply kneel, they are wrong. Mira's lips tightened, almost forming a smile. Others looked uncertain, but the spark of something, pride, memory, resolve, lit in their eyes. Arik's words continued, calm yet sharp as steel. We may not have the largest fleet, we may not have the strongest weapons, but we have something they do not, the will to fight, even when all seems lost. That is what it means to be human. The chamber stirred. Fear was still present, but it mixed now with determination. Rael's frown softened. He gave a slow nod. Then we prepare. Later that night, Arik walked alone through the quiet corridors of the station. His footsteps echoed against the metal floors. Through narrow windows he saw the stars spread like silver dust across the black sea of space. The Dominion. A new storm on the horizon. Humanity's return to the galaxy was not by choice. It was by necessity. He remembered the old words his grandmother once told him as a boy. We are not silence. We are not shadows. Even if the stars forget us, we will not forget ourselves. Now those words rang in his heart. For them, humans were just forgotten echoes. But soon, they would remember. The warning came sooner than expected. Only 3 days after the intercepted broadcast, Aurelia's deep space sensors detected movement. Strange signatures appeared at the edge of the system, massive energy spikes, ships unlike any the humans had seen in generations. Inside the command station, alarms rang. Officers rushed to their posts, screens filling with data streams and orbital maps. Captain Arik Vey stood at the center of the chamber, his hands clasped behind his back, his eyes fixed on the glowing symbols that marked the intruders. How many? He asked. Lieutenant Mira Solin's voice was quick but steady. 7 confirmed warships. Estimated twice the mass of our largest carrier. Energy readings suggest weapons far beyond our own. The chamber went silent. 7 ships. Humanity had only a small fleet. 10 frigates, 2 carriers, and a handful of old gunboats, each one patched and repaired countless times. Against such power, they seemed fragile, almost laughable. Commander Rael Juno frowned deeply. This is not a scout force. This is an arm of conquest. They expect no resistance. Arik's voice cut through the tension. Then we must show them they are wrong. The Drexari Dominion ships entered the system like predators. Black angular hulls stretched hundreds of meters long, bristling with weapon arrays that glowed a dull red. Their formation was tight, disciplined, confident. On the bridge of the flagship Vorak, Admiral Koresh of the Dominion gazed at the starfield with narrowed eyes. His scaled hands tightened behind his back, his sharp jaw set. This world, he growled in his native tongue, is claimed by the Dominion. The inhabitants will kneel or vanish. It matters not which, his officers bowed. They did not even consider the possibility of resistance. For them, humans were no more than an old legend, a species long gone, whispers carried by the dust of forgotten centuries. Back on Aurelia Prime, families gathered in the domed cities. The news had spread fast. An alien fleet was coming. Fear was heavy in the air, yet so was something else, an old, buried pride. Children asked their parents, "Are the stories true? Did humans once fight among the stars?" Parents answered, "Yes, and we will fight again." The human fleet rose from the surface like sparks from a dying fire, fragile but burning bright. Old frigates, their hulls scarred with age, powered into orbit. Carriers launched fighters, small, fast craft armed with weapons designed for survival more than war. Every ship carried volunteers, men and women who knew they faced overwhelming odds. On the bridge of his flagship Resolute, Arik looked over his crew, faces young and old, nervous yet determined. Mira stood at her post, her eyes fixed on her console, her hands steady. Arik spoke calmly, but his voice carried the weight of every life on board. They believe we are gone. They believe we are forgotten. But today they will learn we are still here, and we will not bow. The crew answered with a unified reply. Aye, Captain. The first clash began in the outer orbit. The Dominion ships advanced with slow confidence, their weapons already powering. They sent no greeting, no warning beyond the earlier broadcast. To them, Aurelia was already conquered. Then the humans struck first. From behind one of Aurelia's moons, hidden frigates launched a sudden volley of missiles. Explosions bloomed across the void, striking at the Dominion's leading vessel. Its shields flared, rippling with energy. The ship staggered slightly, though not destroyed. But for the first time, the Dominion saw something they did not expect. Resistance. Admiral Koresh's eyes narrowed. Humans, he muttered. So the old whispers were true. He turned sharply to his officers. Crush them. Leave nothing. The battle exploded across the system. Human fighters swarmed the Dominion ships like hornets, darting in and out, firing their cannons, dropping torpedoes. Some were destroyed instantly by the Dominion's powerful weapons. Their ships vaporized in bright flashes, yet others managed to strike, hammering at shields, forcing the enemy to adjust their formation. On the Resolute, Mira called out updates. Enemy shields holding minimal damage. We've lost 3 fighters. Frigate Horizon heavily damaged. Arik kept his voice firm. Order Horizon to retreat behind the second moon. Deploy reserve fighters to cover them. Focus fire on their lead cruiser. The crew obeyed, and once again the human fleet struck with fierce coordination. They did not have the firepower to match the Dominion, but they had creativity, daring, and the will to adapt. One frigate, the Valiant, shut down its power, drifting lifelessly as if destroyed. When the Dominion ship drew near, Valiant suddenly reignited its engines, launching a point-blank barrage that tore into the enemy's flank. The Dominion vessel shuddered, flames spilling from its hull before its shields reformed. It survived, but it had been hurt, and that alone sent shockwaves through both fleets. Inside the dome cities, citizens watched the battle on public screens. They saw human ships, small and fragile, standing against giants. Every strike, every daring move drew cheers. Fear turned into hope. The children whispered to each other, "We are fighters," just like the stories. But the cost was heavy. Half of the human fighters were destroyed within the first hour. Frigates cracked under enemy fire, hulls torn apart. The carrier Pioneer was struck by a massive plasma beam, breaking apart in a fiery chain of explosions. Hundreds of lives vanished in moments. On the Resolute, Mira's voice trembled for the first time. "Captain, our numbers are falling fast. We can't match them ship for ship." Arik's eyes stayed fixed on the stars, his voice calm but hard as steel. "We don't need to match them. We only need to show them who we are." He turned to the helm. "Bring us forward." Straight at their flagship. The crew looked at him in shock, but none disobeyed. The Resolute surged ahead, shields straining, weapons firing everything they had. The Dominion flagship's guns blazed in return, beams carving through space, but still the Resolute pressed forward. At the last moment, Arik gave the order. "Launch the payload." Hidden within the Resolute's hull was a weapon long prepared but never before used, a cluster of high-density charges designed not to destroy, but to overload energy shields. The charges exploded against the Dominion flagship, its glowing barrier rippling wildly before shattering in a cascade of sparks. For a brief moment, the great predator stood naked. The human fleet seized the chance. Every surviving ship fired at once, missiles, cannons, torpedoes. Explosions ripped across the Dominion flagship, tearing deep scars into its armored body. It did not fall, but it bled fire into the void. Admiral Koresh staggered on his bridge, his scaled face twisted in fury. "Impossible," he hissed. "They are not supposed to be here. They are not supposed to fight like this." At last, the Dominion ships pulled back, not destroyed but damaged, their commander unwilling to risk further losses. They retreated toward the edge of the system, leaving Aurelia scarred but standing. On the Resolute, cheers erupted. Mira turned to Arik, her eyes shining with relief. "We did it. We made them retreat." Arik nodded, but his expression was not one of triumph. His voice was low, steady, heavy with understanding. "No, we survived the first clash. They will return, stronger, angrier, and the galaxy now knows humanity still breathes." He looked at the stars, where the Dominion had vanished. For them, we were echoes, but now they hear our voice again. The Dominion had retreated, but victory did not feel like celebration. Aurelia's orbit was filled with broken metal, drifting debris, and the silent remains of ships that would never return home. The carrier Pioneer was gone. The frigate Horizon had split in two before disappearing into the planet's atmosphere, and hundreds of fighters now floated as shattered fragments among the stars. In the command station, Captain Arik Vey stood at the main viewport, his reflection faint in the glass. Below him, Aurelia Prime glowed with its domed cities still alive. But the scars of battle lingered above, reminders of both bravery and loss. Lieutenant Mira Solon joined him quietly, a datapad in her hands. Her eyes carried the weight of exhaustion. Casualty reports continue to come in. Final count is over 2,000 dead, nearly 300 missing. Arik closed his eyes briefly. He had expected loss, but numbers were never just numbers. Each one was a name, a face, a voice that would no longer laugh, no longer breathe. They bought us time, Arik said softly. Their sacrifice gave Aurelia another sunrise. Mira nodded, though her throat tightened. Elsewhere in the galaxy, word spread. The Dominion's retreat was not complete silence. Their damaged ships limped back to neighboring sectors, carrying with them rumors of something long thought extinct. The whispers grew quickly. Humans. They fought the Dominion. In alien marketplaces, merchants told the tale to travelers. In hidden colonies, oppressed races repeated it as hope. In halls of power, leaders debated whether the whispers were true or fantasy. The name human returned to the galactic tongue like a spark carried by the wind. On the Dominion's capital world, Admiral Koresh stood before the throne of the Overlord. The great chamber was a towering hall of stone and steel, its pillars etched with the history of countless conquests. The Overlord, vast and imposing, listened in silence as Koresh delivered his report. His voice was bitter with shame. We engaged resistance on the frontier. Unexpected, the enemy were humans. A hiss ran through the chamber. The word itself felt like dust shaken from ancient archives. The Overlord's scaled face hardened. His voice rumbled deep. Impossible. Humans vanished centuries ago. Koresh bowed low. And yet they stand. Their fleet is small, their weapons outdated, but they fight with fury beyond reason. They wounded our flagship, my lord. They will not vanish quietly. For a long silence, the Overlord stared at him. Finally, he spoke. Then we will make their extinction certain, no trace. No echo, nothing. Back on Aurelia, the atmosphere was heavy but alive. In the domed cities, families mourned the fallen but also whispered with pride. Children pointed at the skies where wreckage still floated and said, "They fought. We are fighters." Captain Arik walked through one of the cities after returning to the surface. The people looked at him with respect, some bowing their heads, some whispering his name. He felt their eyes on him, not as a man but as a symbol. It was not a weight he wanted, but one he could not refuse. He visited the memorial site being built outside the main dome. Rows of names were being carved into black stone, each letter glowing faintly under the artificial lights. Volunteers worked in silence, their hands moving carefully, reverently. Mira stood there too, overseeing the work. She turned when Arik approached. "They're calling it the Wall of the First Clash," she said quietly. "The names will stretch far, but they'll be remembered." Arik studied the wall, his jaw tightening. "We'll need more stone." Mira's eyes met his, understanding. "You think they'll come back soon?" "They will," Arik said. "Empires like the Dominion don't forget wounds. They return with greater force. This first clash was only a test." In the weeks that followed, Aurelia prepared. Workshops ran day and night, repairing damaged frigates, building new fighters from whatever parts could be salvaged. Engineers studied the wreckage of fallen Dominion craft, trying to understand their weapons and shield systems. Farmers and workers alike volunteered for training. The colony no longer lived quietly. It braced itself for survival. But something unexpected also happened. Messages began arriving from beyond Aurelia's sector. A small alien freighter slipped past Dominion patrols, bringing word from distant colonies. On board was a weary trader with pale skin and wide eyes. He bowed before Arik and Mira in the command station. "I had to see it with my own eyes," the trader said. "The humans, alive again. My grandparents told stories of you. They said humans were wanderers, bold and stubborn. They said you could never be broken. And now, I see it is true. Arik frowned. We are no legend. We are survivors like anyone else. The traitor shook his head. You don't understand. The galaxy needs you. The Dominion has crushed so many and most gave up hope. But your return, your fight, it changes everything. That night, Arik sat alone in his quarters, replaying the traitor's words in his mind. He had never asked to carry the burden of legend. He was a soldier, not a savior, but the weight of history was pressing down now. Humanity was no longer invisible. The galaxy had seen their spark, and sparks could spread. Mira entered quietly. She hesitated before speaking. Captain, if the galaxy looks to us, maybe we can't just fight for Aurelia. Maybe this is bigger than us. Arik leaned forward, his hands clasped. His voice was low, thoughtful. Bigger, yes. But we are still only human. Small fleet. Scarce resources. Every battle costs us dearly. If we fight the Dominion across the stars, we risk everything. Mira's reply was firm, her eyes bright with conviction. But isn't that what humans always did? Risk everything because freedom mattered more than survival alone? Arik looked at her for a long time. She was young, but her words carried the same fire he had felt as a boy, listening to stories of Earth. Perhaps that was what it meant to be human, to carry the fire forward, no matter the cost. Far beyond Aurelia, the Dominion was already gathering strength. Fleets assembled larger than before. Factories forged new weapons. Generals whispered of vengeance. But in the shadows, whispers spread too. Across hidden colonies, enslaved worlds, and free traders, the word traveled. Humans fight again. For them, humans had been forgotten echoes. But now the echoes grew louder, like a storm building at the edge of the sky. And Captain Arik Vey knew. The weight of history was no longer behind them. It was on their shoulders, pressing them forward into a future no one could yet see. The galaxy was changing. After the first clash at Aurelia, the Dominion had begun consolidating its power. Fleet after fleet moved toward the frontier systems. Intelligence reports warned that their next strike would be massive, far larger than anything the humans had yet faced. Captain Arik Vey stood on the bridge of the Resolute, his eyes scanning the incoming data. Every sensor ping, every report of enemy movement carried the same message. The Dominion was coming to finish what they had started. Lieutenant Mira Solon approached, her face pale but determined. Captain, they're assembling a fleet in the Arcanis cluster. Estimates. They have at least 30 warships, maybe more. Weapons and shields unmatched. They'll crush us if we meet them in open space. Arik did not flinch. Then we will not meet them in open space. The officers around them blinked, confused. Sir, we fight smarter, Arik said. Not stronger. History may have forgotten us, but humans are masters of adaptation. If the Dominion thinks we can only fight in straight lines, they are mistaken. Arik's plan was simple but risky. Instead of waiting for the Dominion to strike, he would take the fight to them, but not with sheer force. He would use every trick, every decoy, every hidden path. The human fleet split into small squadrons, each taking different hyperspace routes, disappearing from the Dominion's sensors and reappearing behind enemy lines. Fighters swarmed like shadows, striking suddenly, disappearing before retaliation could hit. Even the smallest frigates carried traps, magnetic mines, cloaked torpedoes, and energy pulses designed to confuse sensors. Every move relied on cunning rather than strength. Then came the discovery that would change everything. While surveying an uncharted asteroid belt near Aurelia, a scouting team stumbled upon something extraordinary, a massive derelict ship. Ancient and dormant, hidden for centuries, its hull was enormous, stretching farther than any living human ship, carved with symbols that no living engineer could fully decipher. Mira approached the observation deck with her data. Captain, this is incredible. The readings suggest technology far beyond our own. Energy reserves, propulsion, weapon systems. This ship could turn the tide. Arik's eyes widened as he studied the scans. The ship's systems were not only intact but dormant, waiting for someone to awaken them. Its design suggested Earth's ancient explorers had built it long before any galactic empire existed. Ancient humans, he whispered. Not just survivors, our ancestors. The fleet gathered around the ship in orbit. Engineers and technicians scrambled to decipher its systems, mapping energy conduits and weapons bays. They discovered hyper-advanced propulsion systems, faster than anything in their current fleet, and weapons capable of overwhelming Dominion shields. As the Dominion fleets approached the sector, the humans prepared for the battle that would decide the fate of Aurelia and perhaps the frontier itself. The first sign of the enemy came as streaks of red light across space. 30 Dominion warships appeared from hyperspace, their angular hulls gleaming under distant stars. They had expected a simple frontier world, a weak target, and were confident of victory. They did not expect to find humanity reborn. From behind the asteroid belt, human frigates emerged. Fighters darted like sparks, torpedoes streaked across the void, and suddenly the Resolute and its squadron surged forward. Shields glowing with energy from the newly awakened ancient ship, the Dominion opened fire. Massive beams cut through space, striking human ships. Explosions rippled across the fleet, tearing holes into hulls and sending debris into the void. But the humans were ready. The ancient ship, now dubbed the Legacy, powered up fully. Its engines flared with a brilliant blue glow, and its weapon systems hummed like thunder waiting to strike. From its command deck, Arik coordinated the fleet. Target their lead cruiser, he ordered. Use the Legacy's pulse arrays to overload their shields. Fighters, take advantage of the disruption. The battle escalated into chaos. The Dominion's lead cruiser staggered as the Legacy unleashed its first volleys. Energy pulses tore through its shields, forcing it to retreat momentarily. Human fighters darted through the gaps, striking at weak points, dodging massive energy blasts. Every Dominion ship struggled to react. Their formation, once perfect, now wavered. Humans struck from angles they could not anticipate, exploiting gaps in both shields and strategy. Even the smaller human ships, previously considered obsolete, became deadly when coordinated with the Legacy's power. Amid the fighting, Arik realized something remarkable. The Dominion had underestimated humans for centuries. They believed humans had vanished, that their species was a relic. But humans had adapted, survived, and learned. And now, armed with both courage and forgotten technology, they were no longer the prey. They were predators in their own right. Prepare boarding teams, Arik said suddenly. If we can take one of their carriers, we can use it against them. Strike where they least expect it. Mira looked at him, her eyes wide. Are you sure, sir? It's risky, Arik's voice was steady. Everything we do is risky. But victory comes to those who dare. Human boarding parties launched in fighters and small shuttles, slipping past shields and entering the Dominion vessels. Skilled engineers sabotaged energy conduits, cutting power to weapons arrays. Soldiers moved with precision, capturing control rooms. Within minutes, one Dominion carrier was turned into a weapon for the humans' fleet. The Dominion commander, Admiral Koresh, could not believe it. Impossible. They are not just fighting, they are taking our ships. He bellowed. The galaxy watched silently. For the first time in centuries, humans were not just surviving, they were rewriting the rules of engagement. The tide began to turn, with the Legacy leading the assault and human ingenuity exploiting weaknesses in enemy formations. Dominion ships began retreating. One by one, their formation faltered. Some were destroyed outright, others disabled or captured. By the time the battle ended, the Dominion had lost nearly half its fleet, battered and humiliated. On the Resolute, the crew erupted in cheers. Mira allowed herself a small smile, relief flooding her features. We did it. They're retreating. Arik's voice was quiet but firm. Today we survived. Today we showed the galaxy that humans are not forgotten echoes. He turned toward the Legacy, its ancient hull glowing in the starlight. And tomorrow, we make sure no one ever forgets again. In the aftermath, the humans surveyed the field of battle. The Legacy's power had turned the tide, but the cost was still heavy. Ships were lost, fighters destroyed, and many brave lives had been given in defense of Aurelia and the frontier. But hope was stronger now. The galaxy had witnessed humans at their best, clever, resilient, and unyielding. They had taken what was once forgotten and used it to challenge an empire that had never expected defiance. Arik stood on the Legacy's observation deck, looking out at the stars. The Dominion fleets had retreated to rebuild, but this was only the beginning. Humanity had awakened not just to fight, but to reclaim their place in the galaxy. And for the first time in centuries, the echoes of humans were no longer faint. They were a roar. The galaxy had changed forever. After the battle in the Arcanus cluster, News of humanity's return spread like wildfire. Traders, explorers, and hidden colonies whispered the same words. Humans were alive. Not just alive, they were fighting back and they were winning. Yet for Captain Arik Vey, there was no time for pride. The Dominion would not forget this defeat. They would return, stronger, angrier, determined to erase humanity entirely. In the command chamber of the Resolute, Arik studied the data feeds. Reports showed the Dominion consolidating fleets across multiple sectors, preparing a massive armada that could crush Aurelia and any human resistance. Lieutenant Mira Solon joined him, her hands gripping her console. They'll be here in 3 days at most. Estimates suggest 50 ships, all heavily armed with reinforcements we can't even track. Arik's eyes narrowed. Then we cannot fight them like before. This will not be a battle of numbers. It will be a battle of every advantage we can find, and every ounce of courage we have. Preparations began immediately. The human fleet gathered near the Legacy, the ancient ship still humming with power. Engineers worked tirelessly to integrate its systems with modern human ships. Fighters were upgraded, torpedoes reloaded, and boarding teams trained for every possible scenario. Even the citizens of Aurelia Prime became part of the effort. They built defenses across the planetary surface, hidden turrets and energy barriers. They fortified the domed cities not out of fear, but because they understood that every hand mattered in the fight to survive. Arik walked among them, speaking quietly to volunteers. We do not know what the Dominion expects, but we know this: they will never forget the name of humanity. Every action you take now protects more than just yourselves. You protect hope, for our people and for the galaxy. A murmur of determination passed through the crowd. Humans may have been forgotten, but now no one could ignore them. 3 days later, the Dominion fleet arrived. 50 warships, massive and imposing, emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation. Their weapons glowed red, shields flaring as they prepared to strike. Admiral Koresh aboard his flagship snarled in disbelief. They cannot stand against this. They are insignificant. Their technology is ancient, their numbers small. And yet, he paused as the humans activated their fleet. From behind the asteroid belt, frigates, carriers, and the Legacy surged forward. Human fighters swarmed like silver sparks across the void, launching torpedoes, missile volleys, and energy pulses. The Dominion fired first, beams slicing through space, carving trails of fire across the human fleet. Several ships were destroyed instantly, exploding into clouds of metal and plasma, but the humans did not falter. Arik, standing on the Legacy's observation deck, gave calm but firm commands. Coordinate fire. Focus on their lead cruisers first. Use the Legacy to overload their shields. Fighters hit gaps in their formation. Boarding teams prepare to deploy. The fleet moved like one organism. Every ship, every pilot, every soldier acted with precision. Humans were not the strongest, but they were clever, resilient, and utterly unyielding. The battle raged across the stars for hours. The Dominion had power, but humans had strategy. They used the asteroid fields, sudden hyperspace jumps, and clever decoys to divide the enemy. One human frigate, the Defiant, feigned destruction, then reappeared behind a Dominion cruiser to strike at its unprotected rear. Another team infiltrated a carrier, sabotaging weapon arrays from inside. The Dominion's formation faltered, their perfect plan crumbling under human ingenuity. On the Legacy, Arik's calm voice guided the fleet like a conductor directing a symphony. Every strike, every maneuver, every pulse of energy was calculated to maximize the advantage. The Dominion had expected resistance, they had not expected brilliance. Hours passed and the tide began to turn. One by one, Dominion ships were disabled, destroyed, or captured. Boarding teams secured vessels and turned them into allies. Energy shields flared, beams clashed, and explosions lit up the darkness like fireworks. But humans pressed on relentlessly. Admiral Koresh watched in growing horror. His fleet was falling apart. His weapons were powerful, but his ships were no match for human unpredictability and determination. Every corner he turned, there were more attacks. Every time he thought humans were retreating, they struck back stronger. They cannot be, he hissed. They are everywhere. In the heart of the battle, Arik took a moment to survey the scene from the Legacy's bridge. Human ships moved with unity and courage. Dominion vessels burned and floated in fragments. Fighters darted in impossible maneuvers. Humanity, once considered a whisper, was roaring across the galaxy. Mira approached him. "Captain, we can do this. We can win." Aric's eyes stayed on the battlefield. He thought of all the lives lost, all the sacrifices. "We can survive," he said quietly. "And in surviving, we remind the galaxy that humans are not forgotten. We are here. We have always been here. And we will remain." As the Dominion flagship faltered, Aric made the final move. The Legacy unleashed its full power, a concentrated pulse of energy unlike anything seen in the galaxy for centuries. The beam struck the Dominion flagship head-on, overwhelming shields and tearing through the hull. Explosions erupted, sending fragments into space, and the vessel drifted, crippled and silent. The remaining Dominion ships, seeing their command ship destroyed, broke formation. Retreat became their only choice. Humans had won. On the Legacy, Aric allowed himself a deep breath. Mira smiled beside him, tears shining in her eyes. The fleet cheered, not just for victory but for survival, courage, and the reaffirmation of humanity's place in the galaxy. In the weeks that followed, the Dominion retreated beyond known space. Their threat was not gone forever, but their arrogance had been shattered. Humans had survived, fought back, and reminded the galaxy of their strength. Across Aurelia and beyond, whispers spread. Humans were not just survivors, they were a force to be reckoned with. Colonies began to unite. Oppressed races looked to humans as a symbol of hope. And even distant empires began to reconsider the stories they had heard of the vanished species. Aric stood on the Legacy's observation deck, looking at the stars. Mira joined him, quietly placing a hand on his shoulder. "They will remember us now," she said softly. Aric nodded, not as echoes, not as shadows, but as humanity, bold, stubborn, unyielding, and they will never forget again. Below, the human fleet regrouped, damaged ships repaired, and new pilots trained for the future. The galaxy had seen a glimpse of what humans could do, and the legend had only begun. Even among the ruins of battle, hope shone bright. Aurelia's people, the volunteers, the soldiers, and the descendants of ancient Earth, had all taken part in something greater than survival. They had reminded the galaxy that humanity was not a myth. Humanity was a storm, a force that would shape the future. And for the first time in centuries, Captain Aric Vey allowed himself a small, rare smile. "For them, we were echoes," he whispered, "but we are no longer forgotten. We are here, and we will remain,